Gladstone Regional Council are committed to fostering a proud, involved and engaged community. The Gladstone Regional Council Community Investment Program provides financial support to local community initiatives, projects and events which promote community connections, regional enhancements, community celebrations and community education. For more information on the Community Investment Program, visit gladstone.qld.gov.au. Gladstone Regional Council. Connect, innovate, diversify.
Well, good morning. The time being 9 a.m, I declare open the general meeting for the Gladstone Regional Council for the 20th of February 2024. First item on the agenda is apologies. Do we have an apology from Councillor Branthwaite? Oh, no, he's online. There he is. Thank you. No apologies. I see Councillor Branthwaite is online. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, councillors, is our messages of condolence. And Councillor Grady, I believe you have a message of condolence.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is becoming very frequent lately. So I'd just like to send the Domain family a message of condolence. So Jimmy Domain, a lot of people would know Jim. His name is James Allen Forrester Domain. And Jim lived in the Calliope community and he saw a need for the elderly. And in the late 70s, he built a Altura village, which was for the elderly people. So, and then Jim was very instrumental as well as doing as a developer, and developed a lot of blocks around Calliope as well. So I'd just like to send condolences to the Domain family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grady. Any further messages of condolence? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the prior notifications of conflicts of interest. We have a very short agenda this morning, being in caretaker, so I'm assuming there's no conflicts. Thank you, councillors. The next item on the agenda is the Mayor's statement on current issues, and I would like to start by thanking and congratulating the volunteers at the Agnes Blues, Roots and Rock Festival for a fantastic weekend of music and entertainment in Agnes Water 1770 on the weekend. The volunteers do an amazing job putting that show on every year. So congratulations to Amber and the team at the DCTC and all the other volunteers that participate in that event. And of course to all of our volunteers across the Gladstone region that make our events such memorable for the residents to visit. We also recently had a visit from the City of Palmerston and the Deputy Mayor and staff, CEO, thank you, headed up that delegation. They came to Gladstone to inspect the city and the region and find out more about our economic transition plan and our industrial ecosystem.
It was the Mayor, I think, the Mayor and the Deputy CEO.
Oh, I meant our Deputy Mayor and our CEO, but and their mayor and their deputy CEO. But yep, I was more focused on our team.
I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Yes, so definitely not. Yes. Thank you. I was saying a deputation was headed up, and of course, if councillors would let me finish speaking, they also met with all councillors in the chamber to highlight the priorities of the Gladstone region to our visitors. Thank you to the CEO and the council team for organising that visit. Of course, coming up in the Gladstone region, we have our Welcome to Gladstone morning tea at Millennium Esplanade. That's from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. That includes free barbecue, children's activity stalls and information for new residents in the Gladstone region, welcoming our residents to the region and letting them know what's so wonderful about being in our region and every way they can get involved in volunteering as well. Of course, on the same day, we have the Miriamvale Wood Shop at the Miriamvale Hotel, an awesome event in Miriamvale. I recommend, if you haven't been before, you should get there and enjoy that as well. And of course, on the 6th to the 17th of March, get your tickets now, if you haven't already, for the Combined Schools musical, The Little Mermaid. Tickets via the Gladstone Entertainment's Convention Centre box office. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Gladstone region for returning me unopposed for the 3rd term as mayor, and congratulate the 15 candidates we have who have nominated for council, who will be elected on the 16th of March. Thank you, councillors. The next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes, G2.1, the confirmation of the general meeting minutes for 6th of February 2024. Move Councillor Churchill, seconded Councillor Cameron. Put the motion, all in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Brentwaite. We have no deputations this morning, so I'll move directly into our officers' reports. And our first officer report is G4.1, the monthly financial report for the period ending the 31st of January 2024. And I'll hand over to the General Manager of Finance, Governance and Risk, Mark Holmes. Thank you, Mark.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, councillors. This item is your monthly financial statements through to the end of January, so essentially taking us to around about 58% of the financial year. You'll find that overall our current revenue is sitting at 52.5%, so a little bit under pro rata, with two big items, big chunks of revenue being the main cause of that, being a little bit below pro rata, being the receipt of the dividend receipt that we received from the Water Board, and also the financial assistance grant that we receive as a lump sum, generally in late May, early June, following adoption of the federal budget. So they're essentially your particular reasons with respect to revenue that we're probably a little bit behind pro rata there. There is a couple of line items there that are ahead of budget, and we'll make sure that we look at revising them. Pleasingly, interest revenue is a little bit higher than we had anticipated and continues to be, and probably offset by the fact that our capital expenditure is a little bit lower than we would have thought at this point. With respect to our expenses, we're essentially sitting just a little bit over pro rata at this point, but not significantly. So employee expenses sitting at 60%, so 59.8. Overall at 57.4, so bang on pro rata, but essentially working through and on budget there. With respect to our capital position, you'll remember from last month that through our forecast process, we've looked at and reviewed the restoration works being done with respect to the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, and look at that work has gone from being essentially operating in nature to capital, because a lot of those works are extending the life of our roads. So we're seeing that essentially our forecast is $104 million worth of capital works, including that reaper spend, which is estimated at around about $29.6 million at this point. Conversations are being had with Queensland Reconstruction Authority with respect to potential extension of the deadlines there. Currently, the deadlines there are 30 June to complete that work. We do have some conversations and are working actively to get that extended. Essentially, the 30 June is the drop dead deadline for that event that we got that funding for. With respect to our outstanding rates, we are tracking essentially just over 1.2% under where we were this time last year, so that is working through. But we have also just issued our water notices that have just recently hitting the mail this week, so for January. So that was so that will see essentially people with outstanding rates have that balance in front of them again, and it will hopefully see them engage with our customer service team and our rates team to enter into any payment arrangements should they need to. Pleasingly, our ratios remain as anticipated at this point, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Questions to the General Manager, please. Councillor Cameron.
Thanks,
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just relative to your statement of financial position, in the past and for a long time, I see that the assets have hovered between 2.5 billion and 2.6, and that we're now looking at 2.8 to 2.9. What is the cause of that elevation? Is it just that we're getting ahead of our depreciation factor, or?
Essentially, when we adopt the budget before, with the valuations of our assets at that point in time. We would have had a revaluation effective 30 June, and we didn't essentially have that essentially known and audited at that point when we adopted budget. So now that we've actually got formal statements signed off for the previous financial year, and that new asset base just affirmed, which essentially has just been the revaluation of those assets.
Okay.
That's moved that just that little bit forward.
So now we've got to maintain that value.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and we've got no problem doing that?
We continue to, we run them, as we're well aware, we run a fairly tight budget to attempt to fund the maintenance on that asset base.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Churchill, then O'Grady.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mayor Matt. Page 8 and look, thanks, great report, Mark, to you and your team, well done. In reference to your comment, and hopefully this is a very straightforward response, the Gladstone Airport Corporation dividend for financial year 2023 has been received, with the return being larger than forecasted, and this will be adjusted in the Q3 forecast. So my question appropriately jumps out, is there an anticipation from the forward forecasting, and perhaps Councillor Hanson being our appointed representative, will there be an adjustment for Q4 in advance as part of that forecast, or are you just doing that on a quarter-by-quarter basis?
So essentially, that's a lump sum receipt from the airport. And that's actually with respect to the performance of the airport in the previous financial year. Right. So, so essentially, we receive dividends and tax equivalents from essentially, both our controlled entity, Gladstone Airport Corporations, and also those government-owned corporations that we receive a return from Gladstone Area Water Board. We receive them in the year after they've actually had that result. So,
okay.
So there won't be. We'll take up that. That was certainly, as we said, that little bit higher than we had forecast. So
yeah.
It will just essentially the Q3 forecast will pick up the figure that's there.
Okay, thanks for that. So it's just an annual adjustment based on last year's figures.
Yep.
And my other one is straightforward. I know we've had this discussion previously, and I'll just find it. Thank you for your patience. Was in relation to the vacancy rate, currently 8.5, and we've seen that spike and dip and spike and dip, and which is above the average vacancy rate. I'm just trying to get an understanding of 8.5. Is that acceptable as a level within the local government industry at 8.5%, and perhaps this might be through you, Madam CEO, or appropriately, how does that relate locally from a Gladstone region perspective when we're trying to talk about vacancies and we're trying to attract people into these positions? So,
Probably for the CEO rather than the...
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. We do track our rolling turnover and our vacancy rates, and we have a benchmark of 10% in terms of our rolling 12-month. That's our turnover rate, not our vacancy rate, which are slightly different figures. We do benchmark against other local governments. Lots of different local governments have different circumstances, and some have much higher turnover, so it is a difficult thing to do apples and apples. But we're just trending up a little bit at the moment, but we're much better placed than we were 6 to 12 months ago. So it's something we definitely keep an eye on. We don't usually compare across other industries within the region, but it's certainly something we could look at if that was of interest in terms of benchmarking.
Well, I know what the market's like out there at the moment, trying to attract people, and there's no shortage of jobs, and I'm sure many others would be aware of that at this stage, but anyway. So 10%. 10% is the industry standard for local government.
Oh, it's the benchmark that we've chosen in terms of a 12-month rolling turnover rate. So I guess there's no magic figure, but we keep an eye on that, and if we start getting too far off that benchmark, we dig a bit deeper into the reasons why and any different actions we might need to take.
Okay, thank you.
I got Councillor O'Grady, but did you have
Just
something on
a
this?
point on that, Mr Mayor. We are tracking under our
Yes.
budgeted figure. Our budgeted figure is 8.5 and the average is 7.8, so we're still tracking under at what we budgeted.
If I might, I know, I'm sorry, Councillor O'Grady. In the last minutes that we had from the ARIC committee, there's some good information about turnover rate, and it is like as our CEO just said, we are doing better than before, but we'll look forward to see the next figures in the next ARIC, I guess, reports. They really, we talk about that a fair bit in there because, and we discuss the issue about workplace attraction and retention, and I guess it's also a bit high priority for this council and our CEO to work on some of those strategies. So.
Yeah, thanks. I think the intent of my question was not necessarily about, was more about trying to focus on if we're having difficulty filling positions, because it's a very competitive market, then obviously, but I'm pleased with your comment. You said you're going to dig deeper because that's a way of finding new innovative ways to try and attract people into our region, or more so homegrown. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Grady.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mark, I was just wondering, I had the pleasure of going out to Blackgate Road this morning, actually, where they're doing some of this work. So that's all for all contractors' work for the REAPER funding?
The REAPER funding
Yeah.
is a combination of both council work and contractor work. So
Right.
the total package of work there is $37 million
Yeah, yeah.
on top of our current work. So
Yeah.
that is just beyond
Yeah.
the scale of what our workforce can deliver.
Yeah.
So we've got engaged contractors to help with that
Yeah.
work. So you'll recall that we adopted back in October, I believe, a package that looked at essentially working through our roadworks program
Yeah.
and appointing contractors that can assist in the delivery of that.
Yeah, they're
So
doing a
that's-
great job.
that's part of that.
They are doing a great job, but if we're at the end of the financial year, we actually have to apply to extend it. So where will we be at the end of financial year if it's not extended?
Yeah, so we're working through that with QRA. So essentially we will, we do manage that contract and manage those contractors. So part of the clauses within those looked at, there is provisions that tie to our funding arrangements, and we'll have those conversations at the time.
Yeah,
So
okay.
if we can't get the funding, then we'll have to look at what contractual changes we have to make.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just continue on with that then? What do you mean if we can't get the funding? Sorry? Are you saying
So
if we
as I
haven't
said,
acquitted it?
the REAPER funding at the moment expires 30 June. If the work isn't, so any work that is done after 30 June, we will not be able to get reimbursed. So if we can't get the extension of time, so that's what we're working
Okay.
through.
Yeah, we'll get an extension.
Through with QRA.
Yeah.
We were hamstrung in this event because of the timing of the event.
Yeah.
So essentially you generally have 2 full financial years from the event to finish the program. The reality was this event was actually essentially unseasonal flooding in May, June.
Yeah.
So essentially you'd almost and it's a very hard cut-off. Then you're already into the first financial year while you're doing your assessments, let alone your contractual piece. So that's where we're at.
Thanks for that,
The
Mark.
QRA are actually on
Yeah.
site today and we're having those conversations.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
I don't see that being an issue being with an extension. I've got Councillor Goodluck, then Councillor Henson.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mark, the capital expenditure, we're tracking, I think, 28% of the forecast, 42% of the actual budget, and if I look through, particularly with the REAPER funding, given that we're either going to, I'm sure we'd get extensions, but we need to complete that work by 30 June. There's only one project there that we're close to 50%. The rest we're way behind. Now, I know that there's a lot of planning, and that's generally how the capital works, but I also don't see anywhere in the report, unless I've missed it, around our anticipated bulk expenditure in the coming months. I suspect that if we got any hope of achieving our capital works program, we're going to have to spend, about $72 million in the next 4 months, or 3 months, sorry. So I guess, how confident are we're going to achieve close to our...
I think there's some downward pressure certainly with respect to where our capex may end, but the REAPER works, your figure in there is where they're expecting, so that's 29.6, so around about 30 million. They are looking at working through that, Our approvals are 37.4, just for context.
And Mark's also, for those online, would be aware, Manager of Finance, Governance and Risk. Would you like General Manager of Assets
Yep.
to answer that question for you?
Only if that's appropriate, if you've got, otherwise I'm happy to take it on notice, but sometimes we see in your report some context around what
Can answer.
the expected expenditure is going to be. I just couldn't see that there, and I'm acutely aware that that's how these capital works programs work. It takes 6 months of planning, and then you start to get your big spend and delivery in the later half of the financial year. But we've got a lot of expenditure and delivery to get through. Yeah,
It's a significant challenge that the supply chain is not helping at the moment. We are working with the project delivery team to try and refine our forecasting. That's with our internal as well as external people. So the 68.6 budget, excluding the REPA work, we're probably forecasting closer to around about 60 at the moment to achieve that. And that's from the work that we knew we were going to do and committed to. A large proportion of that work was begun the previous year in terms of the design. And we're forecasting out now.
Sorry to interrupt, Mark. When you say 60, do you mean 60% or 60 million?
60 million.
60 million, okay.
So we're about 60 million to the 68, which is about 95%-ish forecast at the moment. The REPA work is, while it's included in the budget, is being forecast and managed slightly separately from that.
Given the timelines on the REPA funding, what is our intention to prioritise that work at all, or it's a matter of what we can get done?
Yeah, it is being prioritised. It's been separately resourced. That's why we've got a large contractor base to deliver it. What will happen if we're able to, and Mark will be able to confirm though, if we're able to receive an extension, we'll seek to reforecast the work out, which will reduce that 100 million down to the year end when you get your next financials.
Okay, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Goodluck. That was my question. Just to add, that's well done, Councillor. Are our ambitions, again, still too high for budgeting purposes in the capital works area? Like we've mentioned this before, we brought this up for many, many years. Are we still a little bit ambitious, considering the way the market is at the moment? Materials, goods, people to do the work and whatever. Is it a case that we may be looking a bit too high again?
It's difficult to say that categorically. We've got responsibility to try and renew our assets at a level that allows us to maintain our service delivery. So that's our ambition. That ambition is tempered then by what the market allows us to do, and we know that there's some challenges there at the moment. But I wouldn't want to be undercooking our ambition to meet the market, rather express what we need to do, and then work with the councillors, the boardroom and our project delivery team to reforecast out work and understand the impacts of the supply chain as opposed to undercooking our ambition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just look at it the other way. I would just look at it from the other side. The council needs to know an actual budget, and that you will come somewhere near that budget at the end of the financial year. That's what I'm saying, and hopefully that we've been, I don't know, 12 months into this sort of market, that the way it is now, that we would understand the market and we understand the costings that would go with that and what we need to budget for exactly. Yeah. And that's my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, and I hope it can give you confidence that that 68.6 budget that we asked you to adopt, we're looking at delivering around about 60 million of that at the moment, with the REPA work in addition to that. So we have been ambitious, and there's some significant work ongoing, particularly with our procurement team as well as our project delivery team to achieve that forecast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Goodluck.
Yeah, and Councillor Hanson makes a good point, but in saying that, we've got a lot of work to do, and I know yourself, Mark, and the team will be working hard on that. But if we can achieve, 60 million, which would be 90% plus REPA work, effectively we would have achieved more than the initial capital budget we set to deliver for the community at the start of the financial year. So I'd be comfortable with that, but looking very closely at how we perform. And I just wanted to say thank you for the compliment, Councillor Hanson. I was going to say you snooze, you lose, but then you were nice to me, so I'm not going to say that.
There's not many more to come, Councillor.
Yeah. Count on one hand. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Trevor, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Mark, in your background presentation to the report, you've indicated that we were looking at a budgeted operating surplus of $5.9 million, which is now increased to a forecasted operating surplus of $7.1 million, which is great news for the region, of course. What has caused that increase in the now forecasted operating surplus, and what are the dangers or risks to that surplus between now and the delivery of the next budget?
I think the major contributors were essentially reforecasting of many of those income items, particularly our interest revenue, particularly some of that contract work, and then also just review of some of those materials and services, and some of those came down a little. In terms of the biggest single risk is quite obvious. That's the receipt of our dividends and tax equivalents, and whether that hits the expectations and forecasts that we had from Treasury. So if they manifest, then we're fine. If they don't, then that's essentially your single biggest risk. Because at the moment, that's sitting there as a $14 million line item, and that was based on the best estimates we had at the time. And so let's work through that and understand when we receive that. At the moment, we haven't received any dividends and tax equivalents from the Water Board, so we're waiting to receive that.
Well, we usually receive them just before the 30th of June, like the 29th at 11:50 p.m. Councillor Goodluck has another question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one last one. Mark, just with the outstanding rates, the 4.9 for 5% outstanding compared with 6.05% from last year, could we request a running tally, perhaps the last 5 years of that percentage, just in that section, rather than just comparing it to the year before? So we
You've
might
got that in the graph underneath.
Oh, was it? Sorry.
Sorry, no, it goes back.
Oh, that's with all the little lines there.
That's all the lines underneath.
Okay, yeah, that's all right. My mistake.
Okay.
I just saw the lines and I went straight over it. Thank
so
you,
that
Mr.
tracks
Mayor.
out
I might
before,
need to
so-
get my eyes checked.
We can add another line. We could add another line, but the spaghetti chart was getting a bit busy.
Yeah. Can't you do like a graph? I've seen you do good graphs. The lines aren't.
He does do good graphs. Okay, no further questions. Councillor Muscat was happy to move, and seconded Councillor Hanson. I put the motion. All in favour, and it's carried. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mark. Let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is G4.2, which minor change request for DA 28-2020, retirement facilities Solana at 13 Watermark Avenue, Agnes Water. Hand over to the General Manager of Customer Experience, Rob Huth, and welcome Tegan Schuler to the table as well. Oh, sorry, McDonald.
It's only been 10 years.
Tegan McDonald, for a very long time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Councillors would be aware of the Solana development at Agnes Waters. The development was approved by Council in April 2021 at the General Council meeting. The applicant has lodged a minor change request, and the changes include the entrance plan, parking arrangements, increased parking rates, seeking approval for an acoustic fence, and officers have considered the change request and deemed it to be generally consistent with the provisions of the planning scheme, and therefore recommend for approval. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, councillors. Questions to the General Manager or to Tegan McDonald?
I think, Mr. Mayor, that it's a very sound, concise report, and I don't see any problem with what you're doing. So happy to be in favour of it. I'm happy to move if you like.
Move, Councillor Hanson, seconded Councillor Churchill. Does anyone have questions? Councillor Cameron?
Not a question, just a comment. It's just great to see that a negotiation like this can go through by both parties and get a very, very good result, and we don't end up knocking on court doors to get things sorted. So congratulations on a great outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions or comments? We've got the mover and seconder. Yep, I put them up. Oh, nearly there. Councillor Trevor.
Just one last one, and I have read the report, but I've forgotten some of the contents, which is not unusual for me these days. But could you just explain for the public's benefit, it's a five-stage process, it's five-stage development retirement facilities in Agnes Water 1770. Could you just refresh my memory in relation to timelines for stage 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5? Because the timelines may be important to people who are looking to sell and reinvest in Agnes Water 1770, or alternatively actually visit our region and hopefully buy and stay here.
No. Just use this one. Thank you. Sorry. I got thrown by, I didn't know who I was. Yes, councillor, that is correct. So the council probably already aware that this development is already under construction. So stage 1 and 2 are partially under construction. The reason for this change is that they've had some significant site issues with their construction. They've hit rock, they've had all sorts of construction issues, which is why they've had to realign some of their set out essentially overall. Their priority is to be delivering stage 1, which is the Live Well Centre and some of the houses that have already been constructed on site. So again, the locals and council would be aware there's already some houses already physically there. That I would imagine they are looking to get finalised ASAP. There's still a lot of operational works that needs to happen. Watermack Avenue hasn't been completed, the extension of it. There's still stormwater things that need to happen. A lot of on-site works need to happen before that. I would imagine that's their priority, and that is where Stockwell are looking to focus their energy. Stage 2 is already partially constructed, and I would imagine they would flow on almost directly from that. My understanding is that they have contracts for sale on almost all of their stage 1 and 2 dwellings, so I won't call them lots. I think that will keep them busy for quite some time. Until then, they'll focus on stage 3. So obviously we can't speculate on what the developer chooses to roll out, but as far as our understanding is that stage 1 is the current heavy priority, stage 2 will be happening after that.
And the total bill, the total build, I think I read in the report, was 300?
200 dwellings.
201.
Yes, correct, to be precise.
Excellent. Any further questions, councillors? We already have our mover and seconder. Put the motion. All in favour? Thank you, Darryl. Carried. Thank you, Tegan. Thank you, Rob. The next item on the agenda is G4.3, which is the Local Housing Action Plan. And I'll hand over to the General Manager of People and Strategy, Carly Quinn. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also have our Manager of Development Services, Helen Robertson, with me today, who was on the working group for this project. So, councillors, back in 2022, we identified the need to increase our advocacy around local housing in the Gladstone region. At the same time, there was also a resolution passed at the LGAQ conference in 2022 for the state to fund local housing action plans. So we had already identified our advocacy and our advocacy plan. However, we engaged in the Local Housing Action Plan program that was funded by the state government to develop an action plan for the Gladstone region. Council worked with a lot of external stakeholders as well as the state and with the consultant provided by the state to develop this plan, and the plan is here for you today for endorsement. It's a non-statutory plan, which means we do need to report on it back to the government, but we are not held accountable to deliver on all of the actions in there. In reviewing where the plan has landed after all of the engagement with the state and with the local stakeholders, it's pleasing to see that it is very well aligned to our existing housing advocacy plan and the actions that we'd already identified we needed to do, the actions we identified we needed to enable, and the actions we identified we needed to advocate for. And it also aligns with the Queensland's plan that was just released in the last week or two, Homes for Queenslanders. So if you look at all three, they're very well aligned, and there's no surprises in there or anything that contradicts. So I'll hand over for any questions.
Thank you, Carly. Questions to General Manager, please, or to Helen? Councillor Trevor.
Start the conversation, I guess. Did we identify in our research and the provision and supply of this report any red tape issues that are endemic locally that we could look at by way of streamlining the process and allowing housing to move forward quickly if required in the event of a further boom and bust situation that we seem to be used to over the last 50 years and likely to find ourselves in that position again, no doubt.
I'll answer first on some of the things we found around the state level and things that we're advocating for, and then I'll hand over to Helen for the local level. So in our advocacy, we've been really advocating for the state to unlock the funding that's available and for the federal to unlock the funding. There is a lot of funding available, but local organisations were giving us the feedback that it was challenging to access and was taking potentially a year or two to go through the process. In particular, both the state and the federal levels have really done a lot of work in the last 12 months to unlock that, and the feedback we're getting from local organisations now is that it is getting easier, and we saw that in the results to our EOIs that we released for land at Phillip Street recently. There were more people interested because the funding was available. So we think that that advocacy, and obviously advocacy of other councils around the country, is working. There is also in the state's plan, they do talk about unlocking the planning process, so they are looking at actions that they will be undertaking shortly as well. And then I'll just see if Helen's got anything to add from a local level.
Yeah, I think particularly in the social housing element, there's a lot more streamlined processes. They're exempt from a number of approvals that a stock standard developer would need to comply with. We've built on that relationship with the relevant department that deals with that. And an example would be that we had some plans come in for a duplex on a lot that could actually accommodate 4 units on that block. So through negotiation, we're able to increase the density on that for an exempt development. So still doing the work, but allowing that to be fast-tracked. In terms of regular development, building applications and the like, we're continuing to work with our local customers around delivering those approvals as fast as possible. The issue we're finding anecdotally is really about those supply chain issues and about materials and the cost of those materials, and that's what's actually preventing people from building new homes at the moment.
So in the region, have we noticed a significant decline in the applications for new builds?
Yep.
I've sort of got a feel as I move around the community that there, without any anecdotal evidence, that
Yep.
there has been a slowdown in.
There is
in
a little
new
bit
builds.
of new builds, a little bit in new builds, but we're still catching up from the last round of grants that were available, the post-COVID grants, and you would have noticed that the government released another doubling of the homeowner grant recently to try and stimulate that again. So I wouldn't say it's tapered off a little, but I wouldn't say it's a significant drop-off in new builds, and particularly when you're looking at areas like Agnes Water, there's a lot of new builds occurring in that space as well. So it's just keeping an eye on those trends.
And one last question at this stage. With the review of the town planning scheme that's coming up shortly, which the community should pay particular attention to, obviously, because it could determine the long-term outlook and future planning for many years to come in this community. So I'd ask people to hearken to the evidence when it comes to that, because it's a critical piece of material that'll be coming not only before the community but before this council, and could ultimately determine what the long-term strategic planning and vision is for this community. Sadly, I won't be around to see that happen, but I would encourage those returning to council and becoming a member of council to be actively involved in the ideas and thoughts and processes in relation to that, because it's a critical piece of material that'll come before the new council after the 16th of March. But my question was, is there any mood for change in relation to the requirement for community need when it comes to developing land in this community, in the sense that there, in my view, has always been a restriction when that is imposed upon developers, in the sense that the developers have to prove community need in order for the for the application to be successful. And of course, the courts have their own limitations also in relation to community need, which is another issue. But is there anything that we can do? And I don't want to preempt or prognosticate as to what's going to happen with the new town, with the new planning scheme. But is there any movement or encouragement or view that the community need issue that is foisted upon developers could possibly be removed? And if so, would that then, do you think, encourage development in this community and free up available land for the acquisition of prospective purchasers?
With respect to the planning scheme review, we're doing a lot of that work at the moment. I just wanted to highlight that the overriding community need element only applies in land that is zoned emerging communities. So it's land on the urban fringe that may have some infrastructure challenges or is just outside of the priority infrastructure area. So for land that's zoned residential, it doesn't have to go through that. It's only in that particular zoning. That is an element that we will be looking at as part of the planning scheme review, and it has been raised in some of the conversations that we've been having with the community around the planning scheme. So it's something that before the middle of the year, a report will be coming back to council with a recommendation on the pathway forward for the planning scheme review, and it will highlight some of those issues that have been raised. But certainly the matters raised in this document have been mirrored in the planning scheme work that we've been doing, and around population, around growth, and around what's needed for our future communities. So a lot of that work all feeds in and relates to the planning scheme review process, and it's certainly something we want to engage with the community as much as possible.
With your indulgence, Mayor, just one further question following on that. Is there a number of available blocks in our region that could be released urgently if necessary? That is to say, if there was a new and emerging industry player that made a significant announcement in the community and there was a need to develop land quickly. Is it the case that we have a lot of land bank land in our community that could be made available to cover that surge in activity?
Even better, I would like to say, is the fact that we have a number of master planned estates that have existing approvals in place, so the deliverability of that land is quite easy. Those approvals are in place. It's really about the developer taking action and delivering that to the community. So in the housing action plan that you have, there's a list there of the estates that have, it's up to thousands of lots available to be able to be delivered to the community and the market quite quickly. So it's a good position to be in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Helen, there's a few councillors lining up, but I'll just follow on from that, seeing as we're talking planning scheme. I know it's probably a bit early because we're still going through the process, but have you had much feedback in terms of, we've mentioned priority infrastructure areas around, in the city particularly, around South Kirkwood Road, which is not in, it's in the emerging communities, but has any been conversation around expanding the priority infrastructure area, particularly around the city?
Not at this point. I guess at the moment, the planning scheme review process to date is really about identifying what people are highlighting as the problems with the current planning scheme. The report that will be coming to council will be about choosing the pathway in which we plan to progress, either do nothing, do some amendments to the existing planning scheme, or create a new planning scheme altogether. So at this point in time, we're probably not drilling into those details. We're drilling into the work we are required to do about reviewing the reports that support the planning scheme, and that's around population and the supply of land and those types of things. So this is the beginning of that work, and as we continue the conversation down the path that council chooses mid-year, we'll be able to determine the details and really dig into what the expectation is around those changes.
Thanks. Okay, I've got Councillor Churchill, Muscat and Goodluck.
Thanks, Mayor Matt. A number of us have been involved as elected members that contributed at these workshops as such, so it's extremely pleasing to see it arrive today. I just want to make comment, and Councillor Trevor appropriately grabbed my question, which was relevant to the planning scheme, because it's obviously a significant instrument for the future of this region. So I'll move on from that one. I think Mayor Matt's also made reference to it, is making sure that the findings are incorporated
Yes.
in that whole process, as many other instruments will be.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to make a comment that we seem to be a little bit of a catch-up here at this stage too, with what's happening, more so I suppose in what I refer to as the AAA, affordable, available and accessible. So my question that relates to local government sometimes is the cost shifting, the movement of who's responsible, and I suppose from your professional opinion, when we talk about public housing and the growing marketplace of be it those that are struggling to get into accommodation, and be it, you know, tilting in or right there now with homelessness. Years ago, as you would be well aware, we had a lot of public housing through Queensland Housing Commission. Times have changed, so I'd like to just get an understanding of the state from your professional opinion, and you've been in this right from the beginning, the state and the federal government's responsibility, in brief, to their contribution, because we're going to adopt this today, or I would imagine there would be strong consensus to adopt this to go forward with all the actions, but as you would understand, we're only one tier of government. There are two other tiers of government that have a huge responsibility to play when it comes to public housing. We can do the planning scheme, we can encourage investment, we can do a whole range of things at our level, but the state and the federal governments, and our role also is advocacy. The advocacy to those other two tiers of government to make sure that they step up, stump up, and commit to the Gladstone region for public housing and affordable accommodation. So I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Churchill. I think the entire landscape of affordable and social housing is a real challenge at the moment. Affordable housing is a lot easier for organisations to deliver. Social housing is really challenging to deliver because the model is just not financially viable. Social housing is a small portion of someone's income, the income that they receive from the government, and it's capped at that maximum income that can be charged for rent. And the way the state models it is that they have local organisations, generally not-for-profit organisations, who provide that service and maintain those facilities, and they have to maintain the facilities and provide all the wraparound services for the tenants with that small income. It's getting more and more challenging for them to deliver that. So I think the model for social housing really needs to be reviewed. Affordable housing is a little easier to deliver because affordable housing works the other way. It's more of a percentage of the income. So it's something like, sorry, not the income, but the market rent. So it might be something like 25% reduction of market rent for affordable housing. So that becomes a lot easier to deliver. But the state and the federal government need to provide capital funding for these facilities, and then need to also support the social housing with how the operational funding continues, because that's getting harder and harder. Our advocacy plan talks about unlocking more facilities, unlocking more land, and making more of these facilities available. We have really good organisations in all of our communities who can do this work and do it really well. We just need to be able to make it financially sustainable for them. They're not wanting to make a profit, just needs to be sustainable.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm totally supportive of the recommendation, but at the same time making sure that it's a competitive environment out there in local government land. It's not only Gladstone region that's got a local housing action plan, so we just need to make sure that the state and the federal governments incorporate the huge responsibility they have to the Gladstone region, considering what we contribute into the state and the national coffers. Thank you.
I realise you asked about our role as well, and one piece of feedback that was really clear when we were engaging with local industry and real estate industry and community was that they don't feel that the community should be subsidising this. You know, they do feel that this is a state and federal issue to be funded.
Oh, cost shifting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Muscat.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions, and I think they're a bit more about the whole plan. First, I was curious about when you have in point 11, so page 25, and it's separated by these areas, right? Land planning optimisation, 1, 2, 8. So is this something we come up with, or is it something that was done with the Queensland overall housing plan?
Oh, sorry, that page there. So the priorities were identified by the state. We weren't able to change them.
Yeah.
So we had to work within that.
That's right. So, yeah, I just tried to look, but I couldn't find whether this came from there. I find this just too worthy and kind of, in a way, one of more of those things that you look at and you go like, yeah, whatever. Sorry, just, yeah. So, but I get it. I get that we use some of this language. It's just maybe not that friendly to understand sometimes, and I will like us, for example, I can see that you have different actions starting from the next page based on all these different titles or subtitles. Is there any way we can have something that kind of makes a bit more sense in what we can do? Optimization, to me, supports people in need, construction, capital solutions. Some of them are intertwined and they're the same. And but anyway, just for us to make more sense, because at the end of the day, what I would like to know is, like, we're here now, we say we're going to do some things, so how do we track this down the line, in the next few years to come? So what have we done, what we're still doing, what else is happening?
Test it as success.
Yes, that's right, pretty much, because to me this is a lot of action or government documents. You never really understand, when it is that you achieved anything. So kind of simplifying it. And the other thing is, I see a big difference also in between emergency crisis housing and the real estate investment market. So, and this is all kind of everywhere, is just thrown in together, like, as if negative gearing doesn't never ever influence the housing market. Like, there's a million different things that we have no power over, and it seems like we're not even talking about it. So emergency crisis housing is definitely a social responsibility of, probably all levels of government. I mean, more state government, but, we can play a part there. But when it comes to investment, developing, real estate prices, this is something that, I don't know, to me, it's not here. It's kind of the thing that no one talks about. I mean, we shouldn't talk about either, but I guess we're a local government, but there's a lot of things we can't control in here. So setting ourselves up to do certain things, to me, this just seems a lot of wording and a lot of, like, buzzwords coming in and out, that I just wish it was a bit clearer as to. I appreciate all the work that's been put in. I know you're working with the other plans from the state government, but if I could change something in here, is to have like an internal plan that tells us and guides us as to what it is that we've done, and that is a bit simpler, and that it takes us away from, well, what is it that we're going to do? Yeah, well, planning scheme, yes, that's right, but that's what we can do. We could even, for that matter, people could argue that even different categories in our rates could apply to some of this if we wanted to look at anything to do with housing. We're going to do it? Well, probably not, or, well, we don't know, but that, yeah, I can see, I understand what's been put in here. I just don't know where we're going, if that makes sense. Sorry, it's not a criticism, but it's just, if you maybe can tell me a bit of what you feel.
I can give you some context there. I think some of the things you've picked up in reading it is quite astute. It's certainly some of the reflections that the working group have had along the way. With this program, it was fully funded and had a certain framework that it needed to follow. So that's why we've got the document that we have. However, the positive is that we've been able to ensure that the things that we do believe we need to be doing are weaved into there. And I think you kind of picked up on how some of them are put into different areas, because we had to go, well, this is something we really feel is important, but it doesn't fit under these priorities, so where would it go? So we've had to massage and navigate it so that we can make sure that, because it is important for us to play our part in this and be a part of this program so that we can advocate as a state, as local governments to the state through LGAQ. So it was important for us to have our voice in here. However, I think the most important part is our actual plan, which is a 2-page succinct plan that we have. And we've now reviewed it back against this plan, and it doesn't really require any changes. We will need to report on this through LGAQ, as will the other councils. And the actions are sort of written in a way that some of the things are just things we will advocate for. There's a lot of things in there that are continuations of things that we are already doing. So it was also capturing a lot of things that we already do. But yes, the format's probably a little away from how we do things now. We do things a lot simpler now, but it was the format we had.
Simpler doesn't mean that there's not a lot of thought in it
Yes.
and research. It's just that, when you start reading something and you just spend half an hour and you don't really know what you're supposed to do, is what are we doing here?
Yeah,
really?
you want a can-do document, not a government, we may do this in 10 years document.
Oh, well, lots of colours that don't make sense a lot of the time. Or maybe they might make sense to some people, but they're all intertwined too. And there is a definite, to me, if I was the state government, I will put a very distinct division between what's emergency crisis housing against the real estate market, which I don't know why that isn't there, because obviously no one seems to want to, I guess, discuss these. That's what we have. We have people with lots of houses and people with nothing. So, the fact that young people can't afford housing any longer, you have a lot of people that if they were lucky to have parents that had money, now they enter housing, the real estate market to continue to be, we call them, some people, I have another house as well that I rent, but it's just the whole wealth journey since when we use housing, well, for a while now, but maybe some kind of we need a bit of a culture shift in that, in which, this is where people live, this is dignity, it's not just a means of making money. And I find there's nothing about that in any of these housing plans, which is disappointing, but I guess thank you for doing all this.
We also, coming up just before the 30th of June, have our annual conversation here around strategic priorities, so there's certainly an opportunity for councillors to influence in that conversation around what they think we should be doing as we move forward. And I would just add, I think the value of this plan, even though we've talked about some of the challenges, it does connect our plan that we have here, our action plan, our advocacy plan, to the state's plan, and it does connect it really well. So, and you almost need that arrow point to be able to advocate and get that funding. So it may not have uncovered anything new, but it certainly sends a strong message to the other levels of government around what we need to do.
Thank you. Councillor Goodluck, then Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I think it's good, but we also need to acknowledge it's largely an advocacy piece, this plan. We've got thousands of approved dwellings. There's not necessarily a supply issue here in our area, and that may well be due to the fact that we've had a planning scheme that has worked as it's supposed to work for the future planning of the region. So there are things that council has done. That was one thing that perhaps in the actual plan itself maybe we could talk about more or put some more information in. But we'll use this as an advocacy piece. I know it was touched on, but one thing that I noticed in the plan, it mentions the master planning, and it just says no actions identified. Perhaps we could put in that section the fact that we do have a number of master planned estates with so many approvals ready to go. So if I was reading that plan from the state government or federal government, the people that we're going to advocate to, I can see that, okay, well, this is what council's position is, this is where we are. and we use advocacy all the time. The Mayor and I presented yesterday to a Senate committee hearing on the cost of living. Housing was one of the issues that came up. This is where we can use these types of documents. I've got a couple other little things which might be a little bit pedantic, but I'm just going to touch on them.
Can you give us pages and
I can give
item
you
numbers so we can...
action item numbers, 9.4.1. Temporary review of the requirements on workers on 457 visas. I think that requires a little bit more context.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I'm happy to stand corrected, but I actually believe that the 457 visa is no longer the actual worker visa, unless I'm mistaken. I thought they were closed and there's a new type of visa. So we might just want to check that. I might be wrong, but if we're going to talk about utilising those formats to improve labour gaps, which is what I suspect we're talking about there, perhaps we need just a little bit more context in that space, and we want to make sure that we're referring to the right type of visa. I might be wrong, but I believe the 457 visa is no longer open, and when I looked it up this morning, it's actually closed to new applicants. So I think there is it's a different number. It's an 828 or something. We just need to check that we're actually referring to the right thing if we're going to be advocating for that. 9.4.2, explore untapped markets. Absolutely love that. And whilst I personally have no problem with ex-offender or day release programs, perhaps we might be able to suggest some other untapped markets as well that we can look at. I'm sure there's other opportunities there. For example, training, providing opportunities for lower income people. That's good, but I think we can have at least one more or a couple of more examples there. I'm not sure what ex-offender or day release programs might. I'm sure there will be challenges around that. So perhaps we can add some other examples in there. I would be happy with that. And lastly, just the 9.4.6 advocacy to the Queensland Government for the NRAS funding, the National Rental Affordability Scheme. My understanding again is NRAS is federal funding. It's not Queensland Government funding. So if we can just fix those, or that point, that needs to be advocacy to the federal government or advocacy to the Queensland Government to fill a gap where the NRAS is no longer going to provide a service.
I think that particular point is around filling the gap, so advocate for a replacement of it, but
Okay.
potentially it should be to both levels of government.
Well, when I was reading it, if I'm a Queensland Government MP or officer, I'm going to think, why are they talking to us about NRAS? So I didn't get that clearly articulated through the way that we've worded that. So if we need to give more context, I guess, around we want you to fill the gap where the NRAS is no longer providing that funding, or mention the federal government to bring back the NRAS. That's. But other than that, I think the plan's good. It sets out clearly what council responsibilities are. I take the point Councillor Muscat and Councillor Hanson have made around how do we measure success, but the reality is local government has limited levers that you can pull in relation to housing, and for all intents and purposes, our planning scheme has done the job it was supposed to do. We've got approvals there waiting. The issues we've got are around access to trades, access to materials, getting the actual houses built. Which is, again, those levers need to be pulled by higher levels of government. So that's what the advocacy plan, to me, is about, trying to get those levers pulled so we can get things moving.
Okay, on those points then, because it's amending the document. So 9.4.1, we'll just end the, can we bring the screen up, please? End it at pooled workforce, including the review of temporary requirements for workers, and don't put on 457, just end full stop at that. Is that what you're suggesting? And that covers what you
We can do that. Those particular 2 points, I think, were heavily influenced by the other stakeholders involved in the program, so we might just have to go back to the state to confirm their support
To
of
the
that.
state?
Yeah, but we can do that.
Well, then we won't be able to adopt it today then.
I was going to suggest, Mr Mayor, that we defer the adoption of this
Yeah.
subject to the changes to make sure we get it right. If there's no
I
risks
think it
with the
would be
timeframe
a
of
good
that,
idea,
to make
yeah.
sure that we're confident
Yep.
with the content.
And the NRAS one, just for comment, I think we can do some rewording there and get that, get an agreement on that as well. But that particular wording, I believe, was input to align to the Queensland Homes Plan. So, but we can be clearer. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And I support that absolutely. I guess when I was reading it, I didn't get that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yep.
Yeah, and just because the state have recommended inclusions in the plan doesn't mean we need to adopt them as a council.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
We're just working with LGAQ to ensure that all stakeholders are comfortable with it before it's adopted, but at the end of the day, this is council's plan to adopt.
That's right. And I don't mind where it was funded from. At the end of the day, it's adopted by the boardroom, and if the funding partner doesn't like it,
Yep.
then they can keep it. Councillor Cameron, I think we might be deferring this, but I'll throw to you anyway. You had a question.
Yeah, just a couple. We're talking a lot about master planned subdivisions. So I've probably got a different idea to what a master plan is to other people. So are these what we call turnkey master plans?
No. So, master plan subdivision is effectively a development that has had a preliminary approval over it, which effectively created a very large master plan, but then it was subdivided into stages. So there's a overarching master plan, and then each stage has its own subdivision plan. So these are standard lot dwellings. Yeah.
Okay, so we're just talking about developed land, really?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
My idea of a master plan is a turnkey master plan whereby the whole thing is developed, the house,
The houses is built.
the letterbox, the whole bit. And if you do this on a scale, you get economy in scale, and this is where you can make things affordable. So we have land developers, so we can develop the land. We have builders who can build the houses. We have the banks that can supply the money. And I'm sure we've got people out there who would like to buy a home. We need to introduce them to one another to develop a master plan where the whole thing can be developed right from the word go. I think that's what my terminology of a master plan is. This was something that was developed in America, I think, about 50 years ago. And I had the opportunity to go to America to witness what was going. For some reason, it didn't happen. I didn't get there, but I was given the basis of what it was, and that's it. They design the housing estate. They dictate what the size and the quality is, the colour of the paint. Absolutely. I mean, it's like buying a home that's already existing. And see, what you could do with that is that you've got all these people that want to buy these things. We can pre-qualify them to see whether they're capable of going into a mortgage and borrowing money to do these things. You introduce them to the banking institutions, which in these cases, they were the same people that developed the land. So I think that's a strategy that could be looked into a little bit further. And I think that's really the key and the basis to making this thing work, personally. Because you always got these people that like to buy their own home but can't afford it, can't get a deposit up. There's means of getting them into housing too. Because there's always been these no deposit deals going around which eventually fall over. And there's a pretty good reason for that. If people can't work a deposit up, they're probably going to fail. The problem with that is that, okay, they fail, they move out, the house is on the ground, someone else buys it, but what happens is they generally get taken over, mortgagee in possession. They get sold up at 5-star rates. That affects the valuation overall, and that's happened here. It actually happened here when I moved here in '99. I couldn't sell a block of land for $35,000. So you've got to have control over the whole thing to make it work. And in this case, if you've got control of it right from the word go, from the client right through to the actual handover of the building, even if there is a mortgage failure, you can take it back. and resell it to someone else, and, you know, just have control of that market. Could be done. There's a lot going on up here. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I actually started peddling this in 2016 in the elections there, and the only person that took it up was a 16-year-old schoolboy who said, I'd like to know a little bit more about this, and I gave him all the information. He was highly excited about it, but it hasn't progressed since. But I really would think this is an area where we've got to be take control of it, because it's all here. It's right in front of us. We've got the land, we've got the builders, plenty of banks out there, and I'm sure there's people who'd love to get into houses. And somehow we've got to push them all together and work out how we're going to get you there. That's my idea of a master plan. Just a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Oh, just quickly with the document, there's reference in there to the 2021 census in part, and there's reference to the REM plan population predictions. I think, wouldn't it be better if we just stuck with REM plan and where we are now, rather than referencing back to 2021, because there's been some big changes in the area since that time. So if you can get the figures that we need to put into this document from the REM plan, I think we should probably just doing it from that and not referencing the census in 2021. That's just my opinion.
Helen was just mentioning, because she was involved in the working group, but that's part of the framework again, was the data that they used across the state for all of these local housing plans. Yeah.
Hands are tied.
We can adopt it today, or we can defer it. If we adopt it, we can amend it, or we can adopt it as is, and I'm feeling that I'm not unanimous to support to adopt as is, and I don't support adopting it as is either. So I'm happy to either take a motion to defer or a motion to amend, particularly around 9.41, 9.42, which is also replicated in 9.55, around 457 visas, and also the untapped markets. So, councillors, can I have a motion, please? Councillor Goodluck.
I'm happy to move to defer on the basis that the other stakeholders might, we should perhaps discuss it with them. I'm sure there was good intentions around those points that I'd like to still be able to articulate through this document. I'm just not sure that we've got that quite right there. So on that basis, I'm happy to defer. I'm not sure what Blues Brothers Daz might think about it, though, if he wants to.
Oh, I was looking at Holden. Okay, got a motion to move to defer to the next council meeting from Councillor Goodluck and seconded by Councillor Churchill. Councillors, any further comments or questions? Councillor Branthwaite, did you have a comment? No?
No, I didn't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been listening to it attentively. I really like Councillor Cameron's viewpoint on the whole thing as well. So it's been a healthy discussion, actually, and I really do think deferring it to the next meeting would be advantageous. It is very bright here.
Thank you. Is that enough time? I don't like generally to put timelines on meetings to come a fortnight later. Okay, fantastic. All right, we've got a mover and a seconder. We defer the motion to the 5th of March meeting. Put the motion all in favour. Motion's carried. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Churchill. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Helen. Next item on the agenda are councillor reports. We have no written councillor reports. Are there any verbal councillor reports? Councillor O'Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you touched on the Blues, Roots and Rock Festival, but there's over 1,000 tickets sold, which is fantastic. They gave 300 tickets to sponsors, for volunteers and whatever else, which were free of charge. But they had a fantastic roll-up. The bands are amazing. Vicar and Linda on Saturday night was just absolutely incredible, which I'd seen them before. But April Aikens brought along his crew as well, so that was fantastic. But yeah, overall it was a fantastic weekend at Agnes Water 1770. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Grady. Any further councillor reports? No further council reports, no urgent business, no notices of motion, and no confidential items. Declare the meeting closed at 10 past 10 a.m. Thank you.